Hey, everybody. I'm joined by my longtime fellow Cal Bear and friend, Leigh Steinberg. And Leigh, it's great to see you.
Great to see you, Zenny.
Hey, Super Bowl party is coming up and talk about it. It's location and everything, LA, and, you know,
So it'll be my 35th Super Bowl party, and it's in Los Angeles, so that we're using the back lot of Sony Studios, and so which is the old MGM. So the last time that the Super Bowl was in Los Angeles, I had the back lot of 20th Century Fox, and that was the Hello Dolly set from Old New York. But this time we're doing Sony, and um, it'll be the usual humanitarian awards given out to executives who do philanthropic things. We're raising money for a mentoring program called the Lantern. Um, we have exhibits of all sorts of cutting edge biomed breakthroughs, hyperbaric oxygen, stem cells, light stem, RTMS, a variety of healing modalities that can bring a player back quicker, but also can be of utility to those of us who are baby boomers or weekend warriors. And it's all about energy. It's all about cognitive function. And so the Super Bowl has become a convention of Americana: big business, big politics, big sports, big entertainment, all. And somewhere in there, Zenny, there's a football game.
how would you assess the leagues and how it handled COVID this time out? And will it
I think
impact the game,
I think it did an excellent job. Remember that where we were a year ago, with no fans in the stands and games being postponed, the football did really well because think about the dynamic. It's a team sport where you're close to each other, you're showering together, you're bleeding together, you're doing all this. And yet they found a way through testing and good protocols to make sure that two games were delayed a day. And so for that to be the net, especially in the middle of Omicron, that they, I think, are a splendid model to show how you can still go on with relatively normal life in the midst of this pandemic.
Hey, how do you see and how have things for you changed? I mean, for example, you have new clients now, I believe. Uh, then we have the combine coming up. What is the new normal starting to look like because of the coronavirus and Omicron? And there are other variants now too.
Well, remember the last year they didn't even have a scouting combine,
Yeah.
so that they didn't bring players together in Indianapolis, and they had very limited pro scouting days. So this is going to be a much more normal year, and assuming that this Omicron spike keeps rolling like this a little while and then flattens out, like happened in South Africa and seems to be happening on the East Coast. If that's true, then we're going to have a relatively normal year. People will travel again. Scouts will move around. They'll have a scouting combine, and we've found ways to adjust to what's happening. At this exact moment, things are a little bleak because the cases keep spiking, but hopefully that runs through its hyper contagious function, and we start to flatten out.
Now, for your party, I have not one, not two, not three, but four proofs of vaccination. Can I get in?
Um,
I've been vaccinated 4 times.
4 times? Oh.
Yeah, it's really crazy. To make a long story short, out of respect, what happened, Leigh, was we had the first 2 doses January, February last year, and then I'm watching my mom here, and we were talking about the possibility of relapse and everything, and so we called Kaiser. And make another long story short, I wound up getting 2 more, and the 4th dose caused that limp that I've had to basically go away. And I have to fill out what's called an adverse reaction to the vaccine form. I have never felt better in 7 years. And I'm not. So it's not a political statement. It's just something that is in this. A friend of mine says the mRNA and all that, but I mean, I don't know. I'm researching, but
Really, a good news story out of the pandemic.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's something. It's something else, and I'll talk to you about it off camera because I kind of need some. Uh, well, I'll talk to you about it. People who regularly watch me know I've talked about how I want Kaiser to examine me again and how I want to be this a clinical trial and just tell us what's really going on because what's happened to me, I can't stop talking about, but I'm going to right now. But so talk about your clients.
So, we have a new group, defensive lineman from San Diego State, Cameron Thomas. We signed a big offensive tackle from UCLA. They're a great safety from South Carolina. So they'll go through the normal curve. It's not quite the quarterback year that it's been in the past. The league has really reloaded at that position with some of the brilliant young quarterbacks that have come in. But so those players will be off to training. In the modern paradigm, they train. They get faster, bigger, stronger. They get ready for the combine tests. They get ready for the pro scouting day tests, and hopefully they rise in the draft.
And what do you see for moving forward as far as the league and the draft in Las Vegas, which I think is going to be really exciting. I hope it goes off without a hitch. But the NFL draft in Las Vegas, what do you think about that?
Really, for years, the thought was that they would never put sports in Las Vegas, right? Because they have casinos and gambling, and they wanted a wall of separation between anything regarding any kind of gambling and the sport. Well, that's all gone. And the thought that you would have ice hockey in the desert, as successful as the Golden Knights have had it, is amazing. And that town fell in love with it. And now they have the Raiders. Eventually, they'll have a basketball team. They have the draft. And you had a paradigm shift because we went from this impregnable wall between anything gambling related and the league to teams owning part of fantasy football apps, to leagues owning part of it, to scoreboards that have, Indian casinos and gambling. And I think we're very close. Within a couple of years, you'll see pari-mutuel betting at the stadium. And so you'll be able to, instead of just a hot dog, you'll be able to go bet on the game or any iteration of the game. Remember how crazy some of these bets are. They bet on who will win the toss and whose kickoff will go further and on and on and on. And I think you're going to see that become the trend, and it'll just be a whole new massive revenue source that's always been there, but the leagues didn't take advantage of.
I think about gambling and sports betting, and then I also think about name and image and likeness. And why do I feel like the two are on this collision course where a savvy athlete can really score in both areas? Or am I thinking about it the wrong way?
Again, the contracts are still pretty clear in team sports that someone's not supposed to be gambling on their own games. They're not supposed to associate with gamblers. I mean, there's very clear language about that. As to NILs, this has been a veritable revolution. And California got it started with SB 206, which said that an athlete at the collegiate level could have a marketing agent to market him for name, image, and likeness, endorsements, memorabilia. And this pressure that California put on the rest of the country by passing that with a 3-year start date delay means that the NCAA had to adopt this. They could have had a much more limited program, but they fought so hard, so long against this that that we're in the Wild Wild West. And the thought was that this would mostly benefit football quarterbacks, but that's not been true. There people like Phil Knight have given every athlete through Nike, every athlete at the University of Oregon some extra money. You've got Sam's Club gave 15 endorsements out to athletes with the first name Sam. Jack in the Box gave out a bunch to people with the first name Jack.
Wait, Samantha? Just kidding. Curious.
you have some companies that gave all female stipends, and so it's been much deeper. The thought being that you take a fan base like Alabama or Ohio State or Michigan or Notre Dame or SC or Texas, and they have huge bases. So alums are using this. Alums who own businesses are using this to support their favorite program.
Hey, so in that, with a name, image, and likeness, how much do you see it benefiting women's sports? Because I see a lot of female athletes on Instagram that have millions of followers, and I keep thinking, wow, that's the next frontier. Has that been sufficiently explored yet?
Well, we just had the Olympics, and so what happens, and we're about to have another Olympics, and what happens there is that if you take somebody like Michaela Schifrin, the skier, or you take forgetting her name, but the little snowboarder, they're going to get international marketing, and they'll be able to come home from the Olympics if they perform dramatically. What the Olympics does is it tells stories. And so what will happen is they're going to get a big buildup. And so I think females who are in gymnastics or volleyball or winter sports are going to get a big boost. And you also have male alums who want to benefit women's programs, and you have female alums who own businesses who want to benefit women's programs. So it's going to be much broader than anyone ever thought, because the largest affinity groups in some ways in this country, outside of religious organizations, are alumni groups from big colleges. You and I went to Cal, and in the unlikely event that in this lifetime we end up in a Rose Bowl, that would pull the whole base together.
We gotta get a Rose Bowl. We have to play Georgia, so I can have something to brag about here. Hey, so they should call you. Anyone watching, they should call you or Steinberg Sports if they are of an athlete in high school, or how does that work from your perspective?
Well, so you make a good point. Currently in football, a player has to stay 3 years from when his high school graduated before he can be part of the draft. In basketball, they have one and done. Baseball has a different system. So normally I wouldn't meet a football player and his family until just before their junior year if they were contemplating coming out. Now, all of a sudden, if the marketing agent is also an agent that represents players for their pro career, it moves the timetable up to high school, because all of a sudden that next hot Bryce Young becomes someone where if you don't sign him out of high school, you may never sign him. May never get a chance if someone else is the marketer. So that's a much earlier age. Unfortunately, we have parents that are screeners in this process.
I'll say it. Call this guy. Let him help you out. He's the master. If you have a high school student who you think needs the right name, image, or likeness representation, so call Leigh. I want to talk about Antonio Brown. And the reason I do is because I, I find that he is quite a fascinating, talented player who needs the right help and assistance. But what do you think about Antonio Brown and how he was handled by the Buccaneers and Coach Arians?
I think that we need to spot, and I can't be an armchair psychiatrist. All I can go by is behavior because I've never talked to Antonio and I don't know what his situation is. But let's just say hypothetically, if you have a player that shows signs of mental instability or emotional illness, that should be caught early in the process. It should be caught in scouting. It should be caught in a doctor's report. And mental health is health. We shouldn't have a huge stigma on it. It's just another form of health. But athletes are not, robo athletes that are born as machines without feelings and emotions and all the rest of it. This should have been caught earlier, and a player like that should have been treated because and they ought to have enough relationships set up where it doesn't blow on the sidelines of the game. But obviously, this is as gifted a wide receiver as we've seen talent-wise in the league in quite some time, and can't seem to fit into systems. Remember that there's a real difference between individual sports where just you and competing against the universe and a team sport where you have to function within this framework. So I was just disappointed that nobody along the line ever said, maybe you could use some help.
It reminds me in an odd way of Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character, Ron, in Jerry Maguire, where he said in a scene, "You're asking me to dance." And there's part of that. The reason I present that as an example is because of the cultural divide between Black athletes and a white institution, where some of us associate rules with dancing as opposed to a recognition of that person's individual talent and concerns and emotions. It seems to me, and correct me if you think that I'm wrong, that we haven't really figured out how to handle that canyon.
I think we really haven't figured out how to handle mental and emotional health issues, and how someone with a slightly different set can still make it in the sport, and how they just need some special consideration. And this is why really the best coaches, they have standards, but they coach each player individually. So you have to look at each player, the circumstance they grew up in, what they came out of, what their high school and college behavior have been, and just get some help. I mean, people in so many different fields see therapists. They take drugs that help balance them. They do all sorts of things, and you'd like to see that as a more humanistic approach.
Yeah, I was wondering if he was, because he said he was Antonio said he was doing things to get so that he's better, and he seemed to imply he was on medication. I wonder if he was off the medication. Can he get back into the good graces of the league, or is it? I mean, I think he would be valuable on a team. I think it's a lesson learned myself. I think he was triggered myself.
That's always the question. In other words, is this a recidivist for whom this is going to happen over and over and over again, or is this a good object lesson that someone learned from? And so you have to make that call. I think he did the one thing that you cannot do in sports, which is walk off and away from your team during a game. I mean, that's sort of a baseline standard. So he's going to have to get somebody to trust him. And I would think the first issue would be, why did this happen? And an investigation of that incident. Was he really hurt? Was he injured? Were they forcing an injured player to play? Or was he just having a meltdown?
And it brings me to the question regarding Bruce Arians. I have a serious issue with the way Coach Arians, who I started off, being really a fan of a long time. For many years, when I would go to the NFL meetings, I would say, God, I go over his table, I would never quite make it. But the Brown issue, and then Mr. Abrams, the gentleman he hit. I remember when Woody Hayes hit the Clemson nose tackle, and that caused him to lose his coaching job. How should we handle Coach Arians in that context? Because I personally believe that what he did was out of bounds, completely should not have happened.
So that's an issue for that owner, and then ultimately it's an issue for the league to try to deal with. But just to give a little balance on Bruce Arians,
sure.
We gave him a humanitarian award at one of our Super Bowl parties because he's very involved in the courtroom charity that aids young kids who are in foster care or other care. He's very active in a lot of positive activities off the field that help kids and kids at risk and the rest of it. So it's a little out of character.
He also has the most diverse coaching staff, arguably in NFL history.
Right.
And so, it's hard for me to process all this,
Which only goes to show you, as we both know, that human behavior is complex.
Yeah, I could say that again. Maybe he just needs a vacation. Because Tom Brady certainly stepped in and, cleaned up some of it. But the future of football, and I know out of respect for your time, and I want to come back and talk with you about this, the future of football in a world where television ratings are consistently declining. What do you think it looks like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I'm working off a paper that I just got off from Variety, which is quite scary. Now, Jerry Jones, when I was at the Raiders sponsor party a few years ago, said, yeah, it's declining, but you have to remember something. Our share of it is actually increasing.
So you have hot ratings that are down in general because the younger generation is not watching cable television the way you and I do, or the way we grew up. And they're live streaming, and they're want what they want to watch when they want to watch it. So they're sort of off the thing. But football dominates television. 71 of the top 100 shows were NFL games last year. We've never had a sport, Zenny, that does not only dominates the other sports, which it does by many multiples when you look at reader polls and sports fan polls, but dominates television the way it does. So let me give you the reverse. When CBS lost the NFL, their primetime ratings went into the tank. And Fox was struggling years ago. And because they bought the NFL for loss leader economics, more money for the rights fees than they possibly could have recouped from advertising, but it gave them a chance to show their Monday through Friday primetime schedule in promos on Sunday afternoon and now Monday night and Thursday night and Sunday night. And so it becomes a loss leader, and it's while you have a general decline in television ratings, it makes that property more valuable because it delivers an audience. And the second factor is you have to watch the games in real time. I mean, trying to tape a football game and making the assumption that wherever you're coming from, no one is going to tell you the score. You're going to be immune. I mean, in this day and age, it's pretty hard. So that they actually know that people are watching at the time they want the commercials to run.
I got to ask you, connected to television, John Madden and his passing. Your thoughts?
Oh, well, he was an icon. So first of all, let's take him as a coach, because I had Raider season tickets in his years. He was a fabulous coach, and he was a superb coach. He could have coached forever, a long, long time, but he made the switch. And what he did on TV was to greatly help popularize the sport of football. because he was every man. And when he went pow and bam and whack and all his expressions, he brought football home to people in a way that made it relatable. And so I think as a broadcaster, he also was, there's not been anybody like him, Howard Cosell before him, but in terms of uniqueness. And then lastly, you have this phenomenon of a video game, which is Madden, which again popularized football because people played it in their living room. And there was a great competition every year to see whether someone could be on the cover of Madden, right? And it was a mixed blessing because sometimes it could be a curse, like Sports Illustrated. But he was dominating in all these ways, and we won't see someone with that over-the-top personality and the rest of it. Everything about him, the Madden mobile, the fact he didn't like to fly, and so he had probably the most decked out RV in world history that that could levitate. So I mean, it was a giant in terms of football. I had the pleasure the year I presented Warren Moon, John Madden went into the Hall of Fame. So we spent a good deal of time that week together because I was a presenter for Warren, and they had the presenters and the honorees do a whole bunch of stuff together. And Al Davis was his presenter, but it was a lot of fun. Was a lot of fun, and he left a mark.
I think about you and John Madden and other folks, and I think about the impact of the Bay Area because John grew up in Daly City. It's Oakland Raiders. The funeral is going to be in Oakland. You were out there on 140 Panoramic in the Berkeley Hills for many, many years. I know because I've trucked up there. Bay Area has produced a lot of great personalities. Something else, huh?
Well, look, people forget it's the 5th largest market in the country. So because you're talking not just about the city of San Francisco, but San Jose, Santa Clara, the East Bay, Oakland, Berkeley, Contra Costa, Alameda. And so it's a huge population base, but there's also a spirit of freedom and independence that it produces. So it's not startling that you have larger than life personalities coming out of that area in music, politics, sports, and the arts.
Now, in closing thoughts about, first of all, Patrick Mahomes is having another amazing year. We see a 49er Chiefs Super Bowl, you think? And also, Mike Mayock, what are your thoughts about the Raiders when they replace him, the head coach as well? There's a big couple of openings there I'm shocked about.
Pretty quick on Mayock. And the thing that was a little bit surprising is the fact that they really had a good end of the year, and they win that big game against the Chargers, and so you would have thought it had a pretty positive ending, but just remember the standards for the Raiders, the standards that Mark Davis grew up with, are not that you be a competitive team. It's that you win in a dynamic way. And so I'm sure he's looking at it from the standpoint of when are we getting back in the Super Bowl competition? Of course, they sit in the AFC West, and they've got Kansas City right there and the Chargers, and it's pretty tough division. One of the toughest in football with young quarterbacks and the rest of it. So, but I think his standards are high. Remember, he made a grand play for when he hired John Gruden, and he paid him $10 million a year. Mm-hmm. So I think that Mark realizes he's in a great situation in Las Vegas. It's a lively market. They're going to do great economically, but his definition of winning is more than being like 9-8.
Yeah, he wants the Super Bowl championship. He wants AFC championships. Understood there. Leigh, it's been a great 30 minutes. Stick around in the background. Folks, thank you very much for sticking around, and thank you very much for watching. And subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. That ends this broadcast. Stick around in the background, Leigh. Thanks.